My Ghost Story. This story takes place in Chicago back in 1965. Chicago is supposed to be one of the most haunted places in the world. People have said that you can see ghosts of women running around down by the riverbanks. If you go to the Lincoln Park Zoo, you will see lots of apparitions running around there because the zoo was built over a cemetery. You also have the St. Valentine's Day Massacre, where there are lots of spirits supposedly roaming around from that as well. Well, this story is about a group of people that decide to go camping in the woods right in the outskirts of Chicago, Illinois, where it is said to be extremely haunted with ghosts, apparitions, poltergeists, as well as a creature called the Creeper, who is supposed to be very dangerous to people. So, the bunch that are going on this camping trip are Nick, who's a non-believer, Chris, who's a believer, Tom, who is a believer, Barry, who is a non-believer, Betty, who doesn't believe, and Sarah, who believes. The six of them are all chatting on a chat program where they made a group called the Ghost Seekers. They are all planning a week's investigation in the very haunted woods of Chicago. So, the group makes plans to bring tents, camping gear, and all the ghost hunting gear they can get their hands on. The six of them plan to head out at the end of the school year. It's going to be a summer the six of these will never forget. The graduation just ended, and the school year was over. Now, they were getting ready for their camping trip. The group all check and double check to make sure they have all the equipment and different cameras they need. They were renting a school bus to load all the gear that they were bringing. So, the day finally came to go. So Nick pulls up in the school bus and the group starts to load the equipment onto the bus. Betty already got her camera out filming her trip to the haunted forest. The bus is loaded, all the group are ready to go. So Nick closes the door and starts the adventure. It took them about an hour to get to the forest. They drive into the forest down a winding road till they come to a big parking lot where they had to park the bus and unload it. Everyone grabs their gear and they all start to hike into the forest to find a good place to set up camp. About 20 minutes in, they find an open clearing. It's perfect for all the tents and all the gear. So, Chris decides he's going to go walk into the forest to check for firewood to get a fire going before it gets too dark and they can't see. So, Chris, walking into the forest, hears a bunch of branches breaking like something is following him already. So, he hurry up and collect all the wood he can and heads back to the camp. He tells the group that he thinks something was following him, but the group didn't think anything of it and continued setting up camp. Chris starts the fire and sets up 6 chairs around the fire pit. Then Chris starts to put up his tent as well. Sarah made a suggestion that they put rope around the campsite and tie a bunch of cans and things that would make noise if anything was to cross it. The group thought that was a great idea, so Sarah and Tom start stringing out the rope around the campsite. But at the moment, they had a few cans to tie on. Tom says, "I'm sure tomorrow there will be lots to hang up here after they break out the beer and start drinking around the fire." They were all really excited to be there. Now, it's starting to get dark, and the fire is burning nicely. So, Barry breaks out 6 beers and hands everybody a beer and says, "This is a toast for the first night in the haunted forest." They all start laughing. Nick brings out a small camera radio and turns on some music to get everybody in the mood. Now, it's starting to get really dark out because there's no light out there. You can't even see your hand in front of your face unless you are over by the fire. So they all get their flashlights and gather around the fire. They are all talking when Betty shines her flashlight towards the bushes and sees two eyes glowing and looking at them. She's trying to tell the group, but they are not paying much attention to her at the moment. They are drinking and having a great time, and why not? School is done. It's vacation time. The more beer they drank, the louder they got. Well, now it's 3 a.m. and the fire has almost ran out, so they decided to turn in for the night. They pack up all the food, hang it from the trees so no animals can get it, and close up all the coolers tight and head off to bed. Well, the eyes that Betty seen were still out there. They all fall asleep when the cans start moving just a little bit, so nobody paid any attention. Then Sarah wakes up because she hears talking out behind her tent. So she yells out, "You guys go to bed and get away from my tent." Nobody said a word, but it went quiet again. Then, a few minutes later, Sarah sees a shadow moving along the back of her tent. She's laying there with the blankets over her head, terrified. Then Chris yells out, "Whoever is out there, get back in your tent. People are trying to sleep." But the shadow was making its rounds around everyone's tent. About 20 minutes later, he finally disappeared. So the morning came, and they were all sitting around the fire, not feeling so great because of the beer they drank last night. But before Sarah did anyone come out of their tent and walk around the tents, that's when Betty spoke up and said, "I seen a set of eyes watching us last night. I tried to tell everyone, but nobody wanted to listen." Chris says, "Yeah, I thought it was one of you guys as well. I yelled for whoever it was to go back to bed. Nobody said it was them. So, I guess the forest is starting to show itself to us already," Nick says. Now, everyone is getting ready to go on a hike through the haunted forest. It was really bright at the campsite, but when you get inside, the forest is really dark. Because there are so many trees next to each other, the sun can't shine in except for where there are some clearings. As they set off to go to investigate the woods, Barry says to the group, "Bring your flashlights because it's dark in there." So they all get their flashlights out and start off down the path. That was right off the road. As they are walking, they are all hearing noises that the forest usually gives off. Then they see what looks like a man standing on the path way ahead of them. So they all stop and stare down the path with all the flashlights shining on this man when he turns and walks off into the woods. Now they are starting to wonder if the stories are true about these woods. They continue down the path until they come to an open clearing where Nick says, "Let's do a small investigation here." So they take out the recorders and cameras and sit in a circle and start asking questions. Terry says, "Is there anyone out there that wants to communicate with us?" Then Barry says, "Are you willing to show yourself to us?" Just before Chris starts to ask his question, they all hear 3 bangs that comes from the middle of the forest off the trail. Nick was like, "You guys want to go in the trees to see what was banging like that?" A couple wanted to go, but a couple didn't. Terry says, "Okay, well, whoever wants to come with me, and whoever doesn't, just wait here." Nick, Sarah, Chris, and Terry head into the dark woods looking for whatever made that noise. The further they got into the woods, the darker it got. The 4 of them are walking very slowly, looking around for whatever is making that noise out there. Nick stops and says, "Hey, there goes a shadow." Then Terry says, "Hey, did you guys just see that shadow that was on the other side of Nick and his shadow?" Sarah says, "Guys, we are surrounded by shadow people. We should go back and get the others to make sure that they are okay." The other guys agree. So, they head back to the path, but when they get there, Barry and Betty were gone. They are looking around for them, calling them by name. They were not answering. So Chris says, "Why don't we split up? And Terry and Sarah go walk back down the trail from where we came, and Chris and Nick head up the path yelling out their names. When Betty jumps out at me, scared to death with scratches all over her face and hands, and her clothes were ripped and torn. Nick says, "What happened, Betty?" She says with a very shaken voice, "We were standing there when this thing come running out at us with long nails, huge teeth, and this thing was drooling all over. Right away it swung at me, striking me in the face, scratching me all over, and then he attacked Barry, so I started running away. So I don't know what happened to Barry or where he was." So the three of them start walking back towards Sarah and Terry when they see Terry coming. We caught up with them and tell us that they found Barry and he was in really bad shape. He had scratches all over him. His clothes were torn and he had a huge bite mark in his shoulder. So the group decides it would be best to end the investigation for the day and get those two back to the campsite. So as they arrive back, they notice that all their stuff had been gone through, but nothing was missing. It was just spread out in each tent. So Sarah gets out the first aid kit and begins to treat Barry and Betty. Now they are all sitting around the fire pit, and Chris speaks up and says, "We know it isn't a rumor about the forest. It really is haunted, and there are very dangerous creatures out there that like to hurt people, as Barry and Betty just experienced. So now we all have to be very careful and smart in what we do for the rest of our stay. We are still going to investigate. Just be mindful of your surroundings." Now the group sits down for dinner, and Terry tells the group that they have a couple of shadow people on camera. The group gets up to go look at the footage. While they're in the dark part of the woods, now it's getting pretty late and nobody felt like drinking tonight, so they're all gonna turn in early. By midnight they were all sleeping. Chris gets up around 2:30 a.m. having to take a leak. So he comes out of his tent and walks into the woods a little ways where they made the bathroom area. After Chris was done, he started to head back when he was pushed from behind very hard, almost like a punch in the back. He falls to the ground when this creature comes out of nowhere and starts dragging him through the forest. Chris is screaming his head off for help as he's trying to fight this beast. The rest of the group hear him but don't know where he is. They are looking all over. In a panic, call his name, "Chris! Chris!" By now, the creature has Chris in the dark part of the woods and starts really scratching and biting and tearing at Chris's clothes while Chris is still fighting and screaming. Then he manages to get loose and start running through the woods, full of blood and scratches, trying to get back to the campsite. When he runs into Terry, that was out there looking for him, Chris says, "Be quiet, bro. They're still out here and they are hunting us." Chris tells Terry there is more than one. So the two of them slowly and quietly make their way back to the campsite, only to see that it was destroyed. The tents were torn up, the food and clothes are all over the place, and the equipment was spread out all over. But the 4 others were not here. They were gone. We had no idea where they were, so we started calling for them. Nick comes sneaking back into us and starts to tell us there were 3 creatures and they attacked us. So we all could do is run back to the bus. So Terry and Chris decide that they have had enough of this haunted forest and their creatures and ghosts and apparitions. They all head for the bus where the rest of the group is waiting and leave the forest and never return. Thanks for listening to my ghost story.